When I was young, my parents, my brother and I lived in Northeast Texas. Having been brought there by my dad's work, our extended family lived in New England, and we didn't go to church as a family, but it was Texas, and so I would go to a friend's house and spend the night on Saturday night, wake up on Sunday morning, and we would go to church, usually Southern Baptist Church. Amen. Preach, right? So I can Baptist proof text the Bible with the best of them. But I have this memory of being, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old, running through the hall of the church with my friend, and a random woman sort of gently but firmly scolding us and saying, "Girls, don't run, you could hurt someone." Now, my first reaction as a 7-year-old was, but a different feeling stayed with me that I would not have been able to articulate at that age. But the feeling was the same feeling that children have when their parents set boundaries that makes them feel safe. And there was a part of me that understood that church was about other adults caring for each other and for us, that there was backup, that somebody was watching us, paying attention to the fact that we were running in the halls, noticing that that wasn't safe either for us or for someone else, and that felt good. I didn't have a big boisterous extended family at family dinners or holidays, and for some people that works just fine, but for me I needed that. And so I married a man who has multiple siblings. Here we are. Now I have it. The big boisterous family dinners. But it reminded me of a movie that came out in 2002. It was starring Toni Collette and Hugh Grant. It was called About a Boy. And Toni Collette's character was a single mom, and she had a son who was about 11 years old named Marcus. And the single mom had some mental health issues, and early on in the movie, she is hospitalized overnight, and the next day is home in the kitchen with her son Marcus, and you can hear Marcus's thoughts. He says, "Suddenly I realized 2 people isn't enough. You need backup. If you're only 2 people and someone drops off the edge, then you're on your own. 2 isn't a large enough number." And then Marcus says out loud, to his mom's confusion, "You need 3 at least." And that's the plot of the movie. Marcus on a quest to expand the circle of care for himself and his family. And this is a little how I felt as a kid, and I think I realized that that was what church was. That was what religious community was. So as I became a Unitarian Universalist, I learned about our history, and one of the things I learned was that our ancestors were dabblers in what we would call utopian societies. And this has something to do with our theology. Both Unitarians and Universalists throughout history have believed that humans are the ones, like we said in the story with the long spoons, humans are the ones who can make heaven or hell for each other. And so they were trying to find ways to live, to create these heavens on earth. In the 1500s, there was a majority Unitarian community in Poland called Raków. And it was led by a man named Faustus Socinus, and they became known as Socinians. He wrote something called the Rakovian Catechism, which was among one of his most lasting works. And the community itself of Rakov lasted about 100 years before religious persecution forced them out. And they were a virtual utopia. Huge emphasis on education. They had one of the most popular universities in Europe at the time. There was a great deal of gender egalitarianism in the 1500s. A deep commitment to shared work. Everyone worked according to their ability. It was an incredible place, and to think that it was our ancestors who created it. And then shifting to the United States around the 1800s, there were major changes in the landscape of our society: industrialization, urbanization, mass immigration. Things were changing very rapidly, and people were wondering, how can we live well with these changes? And there were over 100 utopian communities that were founded across the United States in this time period before the Civil War. Some were secular, some were religious. All sought a better way of life, and a few were established by our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors. The most well-known of these was Brook Farm. Brook Farm was established by the Unitarian minister George Ripley. He envisioned a transcendentalist city of God, and they made their plans for this community at the home of Ralph Waldo Emerson. The preamble to the Articles of Agreement state the lofty goals of Brook Farm, quote, "to establish the external relations of life on a basis of wisdom and purity, to apply the principles of justice and love to our social organization in accordance with the laws of divine providence, to substitute a system of brotherly cooperation for one of selfish competition, to institute an attractive, efficient, and productive system of industry, to diminish the desire of excessive accumulation." Sound familiar? To guarantee to each other forever the means of physical support and spiritual progress, and thus to impart a greater freedom, simplicity, truthfulness, refinement, and moral dignity to our mode of life. Sorry, I had to just burst into British accent there. They weren't British. But that's amazing that they understood that a spiritual awakening and spiritual work was only possible if people's needs were met and they were supporting each other. Another of these communities was Hopedale Community, and it was founded by the radical reformer and universalist preacher Aidan Ballou. Ballou was a follower of what was known as practical Christianity. Members of the Hopedale community agreed to a constitution that stated the following, quote, "I believe in the religion of Jesus Christ as he taught and exemplified it according to the scripture." And then they furthermore pledged that they would never assault, injure, slander, envy, or hate any human, or serve in the armed forces, use liquor, file a suit in court, or vote. This was a different time. They were a community trying to set themselves apart from society, whereas we might envision ourselves differently. So these are our ancestors. And we are probably not going to create what they created. I don't think it would work today. To be fair, it didn't work then either. It worked for 20 years. You know what happens after 20 years? The children grow up and they have different ideas. So that's why these communities never last that long. But coming back to the present day, there was an article in The Atlantic that was published, ironically, in March 2020. It was written by David Brooks, and it was titled, "The Nuclear Family Was a Mistake." It highlights the challenges that our societies throughout the developed world have been having as we try to address these changes in the way our communities have been set up. He says, throughout history, for millennia, there was the band, and the band was roughly 20 to 25 people, and about 20 to 25 bands would come together to form the tribe, and they would do everything together. And archaeological research shows that most of the time across the world, the bands were not usually genetically related. So these were not necessarily family groups. They were kinship groups, defined however their culture defined kinship. And then there has been about a 50 to 100-year experiment in detached nuclear families. The idea that one or two parents could have any number of children, approximately 2.5, and they could live alone in their own home, separated from other homes, and that was going to work. It had a good run, the nuclear family, for about 20 years in the 40s and 50s. The economics, the social structures, the government structures made it possible for that to work for a little while, and it hasn't worked since then. Particularly, groups that are already on the margins are the ones for whom this has been the most disastrous experiment. But our memories are short, and we look back to the 50s and to Leave It to Beaver, and we wonder why we can't recreate that today. We can't recreate it because it's millennia of human history where we were not living that way. And going back to that isn't gonna work. Last year in 2023, the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued a report on the isolation epidemic in the United States. And it says, quote, "Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal health. It is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than that associated with obesity and physical inactivity." This is a massive health crisis. The report names that social connection falls into 3 major categories: structure, which is the number of people you know and the different types of people you know; function, the degree to which others can actually be relied upon. Doesn't matter if you have 100 friends if none of them help you when you need it; and 3, quality, the degree to which those relationships and interactions are positive or helpful. So structure, function, and quality. And at the end of the report, Dr. Murthy shares recommendations. He's a good Surgeon General. And the recommendations are for all sorts of groups of people, and there's a page specifically for community organizations, which is us, and here's what they recommend that we can do to be a part of the solution. That we can create social opportunities and spaces for inclusive social connection. That we can actively seek and build partnerships in the community. That we can provide programs and education for community members and key populations such as parents, youth, and at-risk populations. So that's our homework from the Surgeon General. Back to David Brooks' article, there is some hope. Since the 1970s, and especially, so there's been this trend since the 70s, but especially since the 2008 recession, economic pressures have pushed Americans toward greater reliance on family. Starting around 2012, the share of children living with married parents has begun to inch up. College students have more contact with their parents than they did a generation ago, and David Brooks says, quote, "We tend to deride this as helicopter parenting or failure to launch. But the educational process is now longer and far more expensive than it once was. And so it makes sense that young adults are relying on their parents for longer than they used to." Brooks also spends some time in the article discussing multi-generational living. He says in 2016, a survey of real estate firms found that 44% of home buyers were looking for a home that would accommodate their elderly parents, and 42% wanted a home that could accommodate their returning adult children. He also names increases in societal shifts and creation of kinship networks beyond family, beyond genetics. So this is a website that's referenced in the article. It's called Co-Abode, and it's a website for single moms who are looking to share a home with other single moms, which I just think is genius. It's a really cool website. Check it out. And then Common, which is a real estate development company launched in 2015, operates 25 co-housing communities around the country where young singles can live together and share resources. Common also recently launched Kin, which is a co-housing community for young parents. Brooks also describes a co-housing community in Oakland, California called Temescal Commons. So that's our next slide. He says there are 23 members ranging in age of between 1 and 83. They live in a complex with 9 housing units, and he says, quote, "This is not some rich Bay Area hipster commune." The apartments are small, the residents are middle and working class. They have a shared courtyard, a shared kitchen where residents prepare a communal dinner on Thursday and Sunday nights. They share the responsibility for upkeep. The adults babysit each other's children. The members borrow sugar and milk from each other. The older parents counsel the younger parents. When members of this extended family have suffered bouts of unemployment or major health crises, the whole clan has rallied together. End quote. So this experiment of isolated family units, gated communities, and extreme independence is failing us. But we can be the protagonists in the teen dystopian future novel. I want to be 17 and fight the man. We can see the ways that the norm is failing us, that this doesn't have to be the only way. We don't even have to live in cooperative housing to do it. We could, but we don't have to. Maybe there's simply another way to support each other in community care. Like Karen said, we can't keep screaming self-care at people who need community care. So we all need it. We've all experienced it. I'm sure you could draw to mind a memory of a time you were struggling and someone helped you, or perhaps you wish someone had helped you. So here's some ideas. We as a fellowship, we can be, as a religious community, we can be a hub of community care. That is really the ultimate reason religious communities exist. The other stuff is just dressing on top, cheese on top of the casserole of community care. Some of our young adult members are planning a game night. We could have game nights here. We could have sober karaoke nights. It's hard in Wisconsin to socialize if you don't go to a bar. We could be that place for people. We could offer circle dinners. I know some of you long-timers remember circle dinners. We could provide opportunity for people to come together to share resources around meal planning or meal prep. We could create small groups to socialize together or to provide care for each other. Someone recently asked me if we could create a small group for elders or older folks who are LGBTQ, who don't want to hang out at the gay bar, but they want to connect with other older LGBTQ folks. I was like, absolutely, we can do that. All we need is 2 people who want to do it, and we will form the group. So that's the web address, fvuuf.org/social-connections. That tells you what we currently have offered here at the fellowship. And that QR code is to help if you want to create a small group. You just go to that website, click on that, and tell us what you want to start, and we'll help you figure out how to start it. Okay? So there's lots of ways. We could babysit each other's children. My in-laws and my parents live far away. Some of you, maybe your grandchildren live far away, or you don't have grandchildren, and you would love to take my boisterous 5- and 8-year-old to the YMCA for literally any amount of time. Please. Anyone, please. We could create a library of things where we can share the things we own. Not everybody has to own a heart-shaped cake pan. But if you need one, maybe we could lend one to you, or that kind of thing. I recently heard an NPR story about this international movement called the Repair Cafe, where people come together and people who have skills in repair, whether it's repairing clothing or fabric or engineering or electronics, people bring their broken stuff and they fix it together. I guess there's one in Oshkosh. That's cool. There's lots of ways we can be creative to be the support for each other. So like Marcus said in the movie about a boy, 2's not a big enough number. You need 3 at least, or more. We can be the communal care for each other in a world that so desperately needs this if we are willing to have the imagination to do it. Amen. And may it be so.